Majority of you have had or are currently experiencing a quite demanding client at the moment, and you're not really sure how ultimately to deal with it. And those demanding clients are the ones that are taking up all of your time. They're the ones that are going out of scope. They're the ones that are asking for an obscene amount of revisions, over controlling the project. They're breaking your systems and processes, and ultimately creating a situation where you're not profitable, your projects are going over time, and ultimately your team is just starting to get burnt out. And that joy that you had in your agency is now just kind of dwindling for the vast majority of projects, not all of them. And so ultimately, the mistake is actually thinking that this is actually the client's fault. I'm sorry to break it to you, but this is actually what we have done here is we have from the very beginning of the relationship, we did not set the expectations appropriately. We did not actually have the client sold into how it is that we work. We did not have the client want to work within our systems. And ultimately, the client took control of the entire engagement and why they are now in that situation with you today. And it's causing loads of frustration for you, but also for the client as well. They actually wanted, and I mean, obviously, there's exceptions to this rule, but the vast majority of clients are actually just came here for the outcome. They didn't want to have to be that directly involved. They wanted you to take actual control of this, but they don't feel comfortable. They feel anxious. And because of that, they're taking control. And so, if we can actually be in a situation where the client isn't in this place where they feel anxiety, where they are feeling out of control, then ultimately the client has a better experience, and so can you. The project is more likely to actually be in scope. The way that you are actually selling, the client actually wants to work within your systems. Your projects are completed on time, and you allow for yourself to be profitable. This sounds like the perfect world, right? But how? All right. So let's talk about ultimately the components that all build into this, right? So the opportunity here is for you to really be able to be in a place where the clients are working within your scope, they're working within your systems, they are meeting and actually projects are being completed on time and on budget. So let's talk about what is actually happening. So here's the components that are necessary in order for everything to actually work out appropriately. You need to have proper communication. You need to have set expectations appropriately. You need to have a really phenomenal SOW. You need to roll out your project really well. You need to have a very clearly defined delivery method. It's how I kind of just refer to processes, by the way, if you haven't heard me talk about that before. And then ultimately the reporting that you need to allow for all of that. And the piece that's really incredibly important is right now the center of all of this knowledge for the vast majority of the agencies is you. And we want to decentralize that, being able to arm your entire team while also getting the client to actually work within your systems. So the first and one of the most important pieces of this entire thing is how you set the expectation from the very beginning, how it is that you sold working with your agency in the first place. Because the way that vast majority of agencies actually sell is, oh, you want this thing, here's how much it costs. And if that's you, that's okay. That's what the vast majority of agencies are actually doing. And you're not doing anything bad necessarily. That's just how the vast majority of agencies have been told to sell. And largely, it's actually a huge component to what's actually causing a bit of a problem for you. The way that you actually need to sell is based on the outcome. And you have been able to accomplish having the same outcome for a number of different clients. But what you're actually doing right now with the vast majority of clients is here's what you want, here's what it costs, and then you actually do it and you follow the way that they want it to be done rather than actually following your proprietary method, the way that you go about doing the work. And this is actually an extremely important component because if the client is sold into your system, into your method, the client wants to follow it. And so you end up in this place where you're not in this ever changing, needing to acquiesce to them, or being in a place that ultimately causes loads of frustration for you because the client is already bought into your process, into your system. And it makes your life a ton easier. So what I want you to do is I want you to take this page within your workbook and actually write down what it is that is your proprietary method or process, step by step through that system. So here's stage one, step two, and then how much time does it actually take, the time at each stage of what it is that you're going through in your system, right? This is built, and I have this in a sort of circle model because a lot of my clients are working in the MRR oriented model. So you have, just their process is kind of ever going, where they're starting again and they're taking information and feeding back into the process over and over and over again. But what we need to do is be able to actually establish your process, how it is that you go about delivering the work to your clients, and how is it exactly that you're able to deliver the end result for your clients on an ongoing basis that allows for them to actually have assurance that they're going to get to that outcome. Because if you sell based on your proprietary method, the way that you actually function, the clients are going to feel comfortable in that method and actually want that. They are going to want to work within that system, which is the first thing that you need to actually do to be able to stop, to not have to be in a place where you're dealing with these demanding clients, where you're no longer in that place. And so in order for us to kind of fully solidify how all of these pieces work, is I actually want to just give you the scope cementing process that allows for you to be able to not only that first place of selling on the process, but then how exactly do you onboard a client that reminds them of what that process is, what exactly is in scope, and all of those items throughout the entire engagement. Because let's face it, you remember the scope pretty well. You sold it, you put it together, you did all the work. The client signed on the dotted line, but they ultimately forgot. And largely, they're going to take a liberal interpretation of what that scope is because that's what's in their better interest. Not in yours, but it is in theirs. So on this page, it's going to go through the different stages of what you ultimately need to think about from your client launch, your project launch, and client onboarding process. So you need to have an internal meeting of your sales system, right? So an internal meeting for your sales handoff, I should say, from who it was that was sold and into your ops team who's going to be dealing with them every single day. One of the easiest ways to actually do this, and you still should have a meeting one-on-one just to make sure that the ops team understands and can ask some questions, but ultimately what you should do is actually have them just watch your sales recordings. It gets them to understand what questions the client has already answered. They can extract the information that they already have from those calls and actually be able to put it in to the onboarding process for themselves so that they have the client background. Nothing more frustrating for a client than having to feel like they're meeting someone for the first time now. They've already been sold, and now they're having to go through all the same questions again. And then you want to have the internal client meeting. So launching the internal project, who's responsible for what that timeline is supposed to look like, what ultimately the objectives are going to be, and make sure that everything is going really well. And then you have the client launch meeting. So ultimately the actual client meeting that you have launching the actual project, and getting everything sort of going in what exactly it's going to look like. So here's the meeting and how that meeting should actually be managed. Is they start off of it is you always want to start with ultimately what goals are there for the project. What exactly is the client looking for? Once you have done that and you've gone through, hey, here's the objectives, you talk about what's actually in scope and the timeline for that project and where are you right now in that timeline. What ultimately happens so incredibly often is the client forgets how they actually play into that timeline. And so projects go over time. You're not reminding them of what they need to ultimately do and exactly how much time they have to respond in each one of these different phases. And on an ongoing basis, you actually want to cement the scope and the plan. So every single meeting you have with the client should actually have those goals as a reminder, the timeline of what's actually going on, and what items and where are you in the existing scope that you currently have. This should allow for you to be able to be a bit more in the advisory role with your client rather than the executional role. Demanding clients are because they see you as a pair of hands. They are your manager. You're not their advisor, you're not their partner, they are your manager. So they're being extremely demanding because of that. When they actually see you as a peer, where they see you as an advisor, they see you as a partner, is when the entire dynamic changes. And so this is a system that allows for you to actually change that dynamic, allows for you to be able to get to where you want to be. So the first thing I want you to do is go through and write down your proprietary method, how exactly it is that you work with clients, and sell based on that. And then start implementing into your process exactly how you remind your clients throughout that relationship of exactly where they are, re-cement your advisory position with them, and not actually be that pair of hands. If you have any questions around this, I know that I covered quite a lot in this video in a bit of a rapid fashion. If you have any questions about any of this and how exactly the nuance of this would fit into your agency, do me a favor, feel free to shoot me a DM, as many of you do every single week, so that ultimately we can actually get you into a place that works really well for you.